Hello and welcome to the ninth episode of the Time Trek podcast. My name is Antonio Pinella, and I'm here with my good friend Mohammed Abu Bakr. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit about what our predictions are for the future of 2025. We recently just got off of a 2024 overview, which was really exciting and cool. Now, we're going to try and possibly predict some outcomes of markets and industry. And so, I'm handing it over now to Mohammed to start off with something that he sees or feels is going to be an important movement forward in 2025. Mohammed, what are your thoughts, my friend?
First of all, I want to wish a very happy new year to all our viewers. When we started this podcast a few months ago, I didn't expect this will go to the ninth episode. So I'm super excited that we are now doing the ninth episode, and hopefully going into this year, hopefully we'll do about 25 more episodes or more. What do you think,
More.
Antonio? So
I
yeah, so
think
that's going to be our first
I think
prediction.
50. I think we go for 50.
Probably touch 50. Yeah, that's a good target. So yeah, so that's the first prediction to all our viewers that we're going to do 50 episodes of Time Trek podcast, and we're going to discuss some amazing topics. And we're going to also focus on our YouTube channel so that you guys can also suggest in the comments what new topics you want we both of us to discuss, brainstorm. So yeah, so that's the first prediction. But overall, uh, I think this is going to be a make or break year for AI. So much has been spoken about the capability of AI and how it will disrupt each and every industry that is there. But this is the year where enterprises will look at what is the precise value AI is giving to me, to my enterprise. How is it helping my bottom line? I think in 2024 it was that initial stage of implementation and people dabbling with AI, getting excited and all that. But I think in 2025 they're going to ask some hard questions like how is it helping? And I think the public limited companies, I think even the stock market is going to ask them some really hard questions that how AI has actually benefited your bottom line, how has it increased your profitability or your expansion in terms of newer markets. So how has AI really helped you? And I think a lot of C-level executives will be hard pressed about this particular question, that AI now is not anymore that fancy term that you can associate and kind of brag about your enterprise, but now it's about showing value using AI.
I love the way you've put that because it's true. It's like all of this hype regarding artificial intelligence and how it is going to, it's a catalyst to disruption in everything. It's like we're thinking of the recreation of industries and the way people work and, is my job going to be the one next to get targeted, right? What else could I get into? What innovation should I work on? What strategy should I implement in my company? And there's this overhype, it seems. And it seems like a lot of people, a lot of big technology names are on one side or the other. Some of them say we've hit a plateau with LLMs. They're not going to be able to sort of go through into the next level. And then other ones are, discussing AGI. And so what does that mean? How is that going to affect businesses? And how fast should I implement AI, to your point, to give me enhancements over the next guy or the next series of customer or companies? And how am I going to differentiate? And really, what do companies from a monetary perspective have to show for it? How do you quantify that, right? I mean, you have the layoffs, right? Then the layoffs would, cost you X amount of money. Are these AI agents as efficient, or are they showing some efficiency, or is there still problems, which I would think there still would be a lot of problems. So interestingly enough, it's right. It's going to be a big year. I don't I'm really unsure as to how much it's going to impact the bottom line just yet. I still think there's a lot of work to be done. I think that there's a lot of overestimation, even from my side. I think months ago I was on the idea, almost on the train that, AGI is here, right? Because we are made to believe it. We kind of fall into the hype. And looking back now, I'm kind of questioning. It's like, okay, so now we are here, you know, where is, where is the data?
Yeah, I think we are several years away from AGI. I think my prediction is about a decade away from AGI or anything that is close to AGI. But I think one of the observations that's really going around the internet, and I like to paraphrase that, is with time, what you will see is that anything that does not involve AI, thou will that service will become premium in the market. And anything that involves AI will start becoming more and more low cost. So what this will translate to is that anyone sitting in front of a computer and doing a work, that person will start earning lesser and lesser amount of money. And anyone who is going and doing a work in the field will start earning more money. So if somebody is a plumber or electrician or a mechanical engineer, I would say that hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You guys might start becoming the top of the food chain, and somebody who is sitting in front of a computer would struggle to make ends meet.
I hear where you're coming from, and it makes sense to some extent. But then I think of robotics as well, and I think of the robotics aspect of things coming into play, and also sort of defeating that side of things. So I see where you're coming from.
Even with the robots, what will happen is some of the large scale work, like laying a road, probably a robot will be able to do. But say if there's a small electrical problem in a particular condo, in an apartment complex, you still need a human to go up there and solve it. Or a small plumbing problem or a small issue with an electrical line or a plumbing line, you still need a human to go in and solve that problem. And I think that's going to become super expensive.
Less humans, more dedication to one or a few with higher pay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably. And I think what will also happen is uh, the attention will get divert. I mean, so right now there's if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, majority of the companies are technology companies, companies that are in some form of associated with silicon. But now what will happen is people will start focusing more towards things that provide enrichment in life. So it could be furniture, it could be art, it could be different travel destinations, just going out and meeting people and traveling to different locations. I think these industries will start picking up because whatever that needs from a recreational standpoint, from an online perspective, from an internet perspective, I think we will get that at a very low cost.
When I look at this whole situation from like a high level overview, looking at time and why humans are here and what are we doing in this question, and at a very basic level, are we here to work, right? Is where I'm getting to ultimately is this the freedom that we've been waiting for? That's going to allow for humanity to truly look deep inside, discover themselves, and live for a different purpose than perhaps to just solely make money or to
We're
eat.
still very far away from that, Antonio. I think we have not yet made that level of
No,
progress.
I know. No, of course. I'm not saying this is going to happen in 10 years, but I'm saying, like, have we, through time and through many stages, as we evolve and as we create technology and tools, do we then free ourselves from the burden of the base responsibilities to live, right? The cost of, of living in a house, of eating food, of feeding, of this, all these basic things that we do, we sort of eventually, through time, maybe allow for a technology to do this for us and solve a lot of these everyday issues, and not issues, but responsibilities, and perhaps walk into a deeper awakening of what a human is and that relationship to the universe and the stars, right? There's probably a lot there that we have no
Yeah.
idea of.
Yeah, I think we generally have a tendency of getting excited about technologies. I was long back, I was reading an article about when the more motor vehicles were introduced and the horse carriages were like taken off from the roads, pe- people wrote like very fancy articles. Like some of them even went on to say that if once the motorcycle crosses 100 kilometers, it's going to travel in time. And there were movies made on this concept, and people thought that the transportation will now take such a less amount of time. Agriculture will get disrupted. There will be only few areas in the world where agriculture will happen, and everyone else will start getting those vegetables at a very low cost. A lot of things were predicted when the motor vehicles were introduced, but we still continue to have our own day-to-day struggles.
No, of
I think
course. I'm not, but I'm not. I'm not. I'm saying like I'm just looking from an overall perspective. I'm not hurrying up the process. I'm not saying that this is going to happen soon. My real question is, and I hear where you're coming from, that our everyday struggles will continue, but perhaps we will find something valuable, more valuable internally as what it is to be a human in relation to something much larger. And so understanding that will lead us into new paths of discovery, new possibilities and experiences. I think that
I
that's
think yeah, I think it's because of the AI. I when I'm talking to some of my friends who have their kids in teenage, they're already saying that, hey, I don't want my kid to go and study computer science now.
why
It's a
would
field
they?
that is
No
getting
way.
saturated. So I would rather want my son to go and explore music or literature or law, because there seems to be a more roadmap to these kind of fields. But yeah, I mean, we'll basically start pursuing other fields than computer science. I think from 1960s onwards, there has been like an immense spotlight on computer science.
Okay.
And if
Yeah.
you look at the rise of all the Fortune 500 companies, especially the ones that have crossed $1 trillion, majority of them are essentially computer science related companies. So, but I think the next era would be about, biotechnology and space technologies. How do we do agriculture, agri-tech? Those kind of companies will start rising up in the next decade or so.
Right. Like like really starting to take for real the idea that hey, can we develop a system or a machine that can live in space and there be an agricultural aspect to it and perhaps a community, and can we travel in this? Like really these sort of weird sci-fi ideas eventually come true in its own way, right? Like the cell phone. I mean, through time we see these things coming along. I just think that it seems like we'll find a deeper purpose of being a human being and allow for the basic set of responsibilities that we would fight tooth and nail daily for, food and comfort, and these things will become accessible for everybody. And so we're opening up a world of opportunity. Interesting.
When I look at the planet Earth, I think the single biggest opportunity that humans have not tapped is the oceans. And we still don't have autonomous robots that go and catch fish. And why have we not turned our oceans into these fish making laboratories where
All
we
right.
can there's still a lot of areas on the earth which does not have good amount of food. And if we can figure out a way to cultivate fish and other sea related vegetables in the oceans, I think it will solve the hunger problem. It will start end up creating more food than the world requires. What has happened is that we have predominantly become dependent on the agriculture itself, but we have not focused on, if we can create some kind of domestication of sea animals and utilize them for, some sort of fisheries, like turning some of the bigger oceans into a place where we can, make these, you know,
I think the first, considering artificial intelligence and all these things that are going to come about, I think the first problems that we focus on solving are things like waste, right? Are things like, before we go build a city under the water, let's think about how we can decompose of waste or use materials that are
That's
different.
what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about cities. What I'm talking about is, like, for example, we know that in oceans there are a lot of fish, but we are not actively breeding these fish. You have in Australia where, the humans are actively have sheep farms, and they have actively created breeding of sheep, and in that sheep are exported once they grow up. So there's an industry that is established for that. What humans have been traditionally doing is going into the ocean waters and catching fish, bringing in and selling in the markets, but no country has actively invested technology and the human resources in creating an environment in the oceans that allows breeding of fish.
It's an interesting business model, but it's like, yeah, do you, first of all, you have to buy the infrastructure to then close off a portion of the ocean to then breed a certain type of fish so that it grows. And then, I see how that can be a complex solution, but it's true, right? If somebody solves that, suddenly I mean, imagine breeding tuna at large scale, which is super expensive, right? That's an amazing project, right? I think that's a good startup idea here.
Life, in order to generate life, what do you need? You need a lot of sunlight, you need a lot of water, and you need minerals. All three of them are
In
available
the
in abundance in ocean. And yet, what we do is we cultivate our plants on the earth. We breed animals on the land, but we have no focus on the oceans. And I think that's more than 70% of the overall real estate of the earth,
Yeah.
and full of water. Now imagine we find a planet somewhere that has that level of water. We would have got super excited to start, to build systems that will utilize that water. But right on the earth, we have absolutely ignored those oceans.
Right. So here we are searching for planets that have presence of water. And so what happens when we do find them? We can't even utilize the water, we're not even understanding our own system. Who are we to now find a planet, X amount of miles away and we're going to suddenly, arrive there and do what? So, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The ocean does hold a lot of potential to do many things, and we still, yeah. And I was just saying in general, like the idea of us solving like large scale problems, things like waste, things like energy, and these different areas. And then, we also just like utilizing what we have in a more effective way to enrichen where we are to then be able to also lead that into the future of, wherever we explore, whether it be another planet or what have you.
Even on the concept of energy, right? There's always a talk about where do we go and put all this solar cells. Why are we not, you know, putting an effort to create floating solar cells in this large ocean?
I could see the complexities that come with that, but yes, right.
But literally, you can use the same water for the purpose of cooling. Even a school kid is taught that water is a very effective coolant.
Yeah.
So
No,
you
yeah,
have
for
the
sure.
ocean and you have the solar cells. You just have to figure out how do you keep these solar cells floating on the water.
Right, and you would have to create a material that wouldn't, be affected by salt in the long term, and then something, a floating device, and then if they're under currents, it could pull it, and so there's a lot things to be figured out for sure. But absolutely, once we were to solve the immediate
We
problems,
are trying to figure out how to land a multi-ton rocket from the space on like two rods holding.
and it's incredible. But what do you think is holding us back? Why aren't these people that are doing these things not focusing? What do you feel there?
I think historically humans have always been defocused. If you look at the largest structures that humans built, 4,000 years ago was pyramids. After pyramids, the next largest structure that humans built was Eiffel Tower, which was like about 3,700 years odd years later.
Hmm.
And the pyramids were approximately 450 feet, right, in the height, or 500 feet. You don't find any other building in the next 2,000, 3,000 years that went anywhere close to that. So I think humans in throughout the history have been defocused on certain things and then they regain their focus back. So I think we are now living in these times where we are highly defocused. We are looking at things which are, I don't know, which are not even a priority.
So you think that the human race is sort of not focused, or just looking for more exciting topics that are not so, in a way, the ocean is accessible, right? It's there. It's complex if you go try and do something there, but it's there and it's kind of You kind of look over it, and what you're saying is like the stars are a much more interesting and cool story to tell to the world.
We actually spend more money on figuring out what's happening on Mars than figuring out what's happening in Antarctica. There are very few countries in the world actually have a station in Antarctica.
Yeah, yeah. And Antarctica is such a large like mass, right? And we know nothing about it. It's just sitting there.
It's sitting there. We haven't, dug deep inside Antarctica to figure out. Maybe there are fossils of prehistoric animals well preserved in that ice that we can figure out a lot of other problems that have previously occurred on the earth, and there are solutions to a lot of other things. But we haven't even explored Antarctica, and and we want to look at comets and Mars. We're sending missions to.
And from what I understand, there's like some sort of an agreement, a mutual agreement between many countries that they sort of blocked off a large portion of it. I mean, I'm no Antarctica expert, but it seems like there's a lot of red tape around
Yeah,
access to
there
this
seems
area.
to be there are a lot of conspiracy theories that also float around because of that red tape. But I essentially feel it's just humans being defocused on what is there currently available. So I read this book called In the Box. It's one of the books that is behind me. The amazing thing that this author says is that often we kind of get distracted by out of the box thinking, but the real solutions are always in the box. And some of the best entrepreneurs are always the ones who use in the box thinking, where what are the kind of network I have, what are the talents I have, and what I can build using that network and that talent, what I can build. And they end up building amazing things. Out of the box is very rare. Sometimes you succeed, but it gets a lot of PR. It gets a lot of attention from the people. So everybody thinks we have to do out of the box things. No, you just have to do in the box. And I think oceans and figuring out what's happening on the earth is in the box. It's not cool, but it will produce a lot of results.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to see, like, to dive into the developments that are happening, regarding the ocean. I don't see many startups trying to solve problems. I'm sure there are, many startups that are going deep into the ocean. I mean, what we see online also is that there's a lot of failed missions and a lot of danger. I mean, there's danger to go into space, right? Of course, just the same, if not more. But you have all these, you have billionaires that have these submarines that go and they never come back, and it's a scary story.
Well,
It's
people underestimate how complex that problem is. So they spend very little money, and then when they try to do those kind of adventures, it backfires. Whereas with the space, people are extraordinarily careful because they know it's a complex problem.
I'm unsure of that because we see many different rockets being going up to space and success missions. Every once in a while, we'll hear about a failed mission. Perhaps every once in a while, people die, but it's not the typical thing that you hear. Like statistically, like it seems like there's much more success than failure with the deep ocean. It's like if somebody does have the guts and the money and the team and the dream to go do it, it seems like there's a high probability, higher at least, that they're going to not come back. And that's scary. And so are they underestimating it, or is it that much more complex? I mean, is space would seem to me that it would be equally, if not more complex, because you have to get there first. So there's an additional layer of getting there and then dealing with the different uh,
Problem with the kind of engineers that each technology attracts. With space, because it's cool, it attracts some of the best engineers. Whereas ocean technologies is not that cool of a field, so it doesn't attract like the best of the engineers. So you end up building a very mediocre technology.
could be.
Could be, could
Could
be,
be.
could, yeah.
So, what other industries do you think, or what do you see? Who's right now, if you were to pick apart or target a particular industry that's very shaky right now, like maybe something that's going to get targeted soon? Maybe this year.
I think the healthcare is absolutely broken,
Hmm.
and uh, I would say that in last 100 years we have hardly progressed when it comes to healthcare.
So talk to me a little bit about that. What are some of the paths that you've seen that have been being taken and nothing has changed? It sounds like things have remained the same and constant for the last
So, for
100 years.
example, if you take a time machine, revisit 100 years ago, okay, you go to various other industry verticals. But when it comes to healthcare, you will almost find the hospitals and the doctors are pretty much the same. They have not changed. The syringes remain the same. The doctor's way of dealing things remain the same. The stethoscope has remained the same. You would still find the terminology that the doctor is using, and the way they are writing the prescription, or whether the waiting room of the doctor or a clinic just remains the same. And they have, for some reason, resisted the change in last 100 years. I understand that there have been small surgical improvements that have happened. We've figured out, how to do few more surgeries. But how complex it is to just figure out how to do surgeries. So I think the overall field of healthcare has predominantly remained unchanged. There's a lot of some level of progress on insurance and how do you claim insurance and all that. But this is the BS kind of field. I mean, it's like
Right,
it's
but
just
okay.
paperwork.
But I mean, so let's look at it. So the processes. I mean, okay. So the processes they look relatively the same. I mean, the human body doesn't change, right? There's no innovation there, right? It's not like you have a for the last 100 years. I don't know how much advancement they've made in understanding more in depth the human body. They absolutely there has been, right? But I mean, the human body does remain relatively the same. So from an instrument perspective, from an approach on how to deal with certain problems, that's there. Are you talking more about like the way the processes from exterior perspective work, as far as you going in, like where would you implement innovation? What specific areas would you kind of turn on its head, or can you?
So first of all, I think we got to recognize that the healthcare is broken, and the population has considerably increased in the world, but at the same time, the ability of the doctors to see the patients in a very efficient way has not improved. So if you go back to 1925 and you look at how the doctor saw a patient, when a patient walked into a clinic, is effectively 95% the same way he's doing in 2025. He probably will have the same stethoscope. The patient will walk in, he'll ask the same set of questions, probably use a thermometer to check whether he has temperature or not, use the same kind of a blood pressure machine to check. Maybe it is digital now, but it's the same process. And then spends that 10 minutes, understand what the problem is, write a prescription. I think that progress has not happened in the 100 years. You know, when the patient is walking in, we could just have devices that can effectively scan the patient and give a report in front of the doctor within milliseconds. If we put in effort, this could have happened, but we haven't put effort in this direction.
It seems to me like just from an outsider, I'm not deeply familiar with the healthcare space in its sense, but all I see is this: people don't like to go to the doctor. It seems like there's a blanket solution for everybody in many ways, and I feel like the future of healthcare should be personalized care. So there should be in-depth analysis of human blood work and everything, and then based on that, there should be a plan. And it's still kind of not there. I see personalized startups coming, or personalized medicine startups popping up, and I'm sure people are trying to attack it, but it's still not implemented at a large scale. There isn't that. And I don't know if it's from a cost perspective, it may not make sense. Perhaps AI will help with the cost of really doing this. But ultimately, people I don't think are even trusting their doctors anymore, right? Because it's like a lot of doctors are now, they're part of a pharmaceutical chain of selling or pushing a particular product. So it's just in the interest of making money. And sort of that should be illegal, right? There should be the doctor should make no money on prescribing any sort of solution to the patient. The patient, with the interest of the doctor, should be the better of the patient, and that's it. It's not a business. It's not keep them hooked. It's not, we'll continue to evaluate. It's, hey, how can we address this as fast as possible, most effectively, so you don't have to come back? And perhaps that'll lower the cost of healthcare if there was a true solution based approach in the healthcare system. But it seems like there's so much, it's so capitalized in a sense that, like, everybody's searching for the way to make money and the way to keep that patient a patient, it seems, that there is no real solution driven approach to all of this, and it kind of sucks. So people, me for example, I don't like going to the doctor. Like, I'd rather, I don't know, I mean, I go when I have to, but I prefer to just avoid
Yeah,
the
I think
doctor at all means
you know,
necessary.
this might be a controversial point, and this might get a lot of views on LinkedIn, and people might get triggered by this. But I think United States is today holding back the development in healthcare field. And there are a lot of things that I can speak about, and people will criticize me for saying that. But I think what has happened is there's so much of red tape that has come across. I mean, United States has created so much of red tape around healthcare that any sort of innovation in healthcare has become extremely difficult. And why United States is because majority of the funding for startups and any sort of disruptive technologies is in United States. And unfortunately, when it comes to healthcare, there's just so much of red that you know no
Right.
matter how
It's
much investment you do, it does not produce results. And one of the simplest example is healthcare today in the United States is the only industry that still uses fax machines. I mean, these are the machines that went irrelevant when the email came in back in 1990s. And no place in the world that uses fax machines, but you go to any doctor office, they still have a fax machine. So, and the regulations in the United States enforce the doctors to keep having these fax machines.
I it's and this, I think this is not just in healthcare, but I think there's suppression of innovation all over, of energy, of medicine, of things, and
In
that's at the
general,
top.
then government agencies try to, suffocate innovation. But when it comes to healthcare, they are so paranoid about upgrading the processes that they are not just suffocating, but they are like killing it. They're
But
like
let's think
absolutely
let's think about this from the higher up perspective. Let's say a huge innovation in the energy space where we've driven the energy costs down substantially. You have countries that their base ability to bring in money is through exports of oil or whatever it may be. And if one of these innovations does come to light and gets spread, it'll spread like like wildfire, right? And you have countries and economies that'll break in half. It's like you can't slowly release a game-changing type innovation for energy or something. It just, if it hits, it's over. And so it'll disrupt economies. And I mean, this goes for many things. For, let's say, pharmaceutical companies, if there's a solution for cancer or for any disease that, a lot of people may encounter in their lives, like, is it in their best interest to allow that to go forward? I feel like there's so much corruption at the top to suppress not only healthcare innovations, but innovations from multiple fields. And that's a huge problem in this world. I mean, am I relating back to the healthcare innovations that you're talking about, like things like, a cure for cancer or a cure for something? Is that one? Is that an aspect of it?
one of the most amazing healthcare innovation that I noticed in recent times was in China. What they did was on the public toilets, they put up a sensor. So what that sensor does is that it analyzes the urine, and it just there's a small screen that tells the user that, hey, here's a set of problems that I see in your urine.
Amazing,
And it
amazing.
just stays for a few seconds and it goes away. So now imagine how helpful that is for the citizens of the entire country. People would have can diagnose whatever the problems that they have. They might have not even be aware that they have that problem, but just using that public toilet, they get to know that they can proactively go and visit a clinic and get the problem resolved. That's innovation.
Right. And it even like it okay. I mean, through urine, I don't know. I'm not sure about this, but I'm sure in a way they can tell perhaps if you're lacking in a certain vitamin, or if you need more of whatever it may be from a nutrient perspective, you can get analyzed, and right there that can effectively,
And it's
yeah,
free of cost.
help somebody out.
Yeah, and it's free of cost. And I think that's of immense value.
Yeah.
So that for me is innovation. And I think those are the kind of innovations that in a lot of countries, because of the regulation, such innovations are kind of killed at even before they are born. And I
Why do
think
you think they suppress that? Why would they suppress that? Do you think that it's based on like maybe there would be a mix of urine, and so it wouldn't give you the correct results every single time, or what would be the reason why they'd suppress something like this?
I think so. First of all, in US and Europe, the regulations are extremely strict when it comes to uh, patient data, and there's so many rules that are around that, and there's so much scope for people to just create litigation, um, that people innovators don't even want to innovate. They would rather go and innovate in some other field, maybe in electronics, maybe in other retail and other fields, then struggle their life in healthcare, and then somebody from the government or some crazy doctor will just create a litigation and stop their innovation from coming to the market.
Right. So, oh, this is providing inaccurate data because of X, Y, and Z, and somebody thought that they had this and they did this, and this is what happened, and therefore there's a lawsuit that comes about, and it's a risk. We got to get rid of it. So yeah.
You tell me what are the five memorable innovations that have happened in healthcare in last 25 years?
To be honest with you, I have no clue. I don't know. I don't know. Let's Let me brainstorm this. There hasn't been any sort of cures at a mass scale. Hardware hasn't changed, right? There's no sort of mechanical type robotics that have been implemented. There was a company that we've all heard of that scammed society, claiming that they could, with a pinch
Yep,
of your blood, could.
Theranos.
Yeah, right. So they can, yeah, that was a fraud. There hasn't been any sort of humongous innovations that have come to light that you read of. It's just kind of, yeah,
Yep,
stagnant.
it's so medieval that one has to give a blood of a small a quantity of a small bottle, even from an infant. That's the amount of blood they take out to do basic analysis. So I think healthcare, if there's any smart kid listening to our podcast, I think healthcare is the field that you have to get in.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're going to war if you get in to innovate. It sounds like you're going to go to war.
And other thing, what I have noticed is, for example, in the world where cryptocurrencies were at some point of time became like a gray area, there were countries that sort of welcomed cryptocurrencies. They created regulations around cryptocurrencies and said, hey, we 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 welcome any sort of people who are associated with crypto to come to our country. For example,
Like El
Dubai
Salvador.
put out the red carpet welcome for anyone with crypto investments to come to Dubai, and they wanted to make Dubai as a crypto hub. I think there's also a need for some countries to kind of create an environment for healthcare where they invite the researchers across the world to come to their country, where they they kind of reduce the regulations and create like a, you still require an oversight body, but if that oversight body should not be of very traditional thought that I'm going to resist any sort of innovation.
This is the problem with that idea, and I love that idea, right? Because it just promotes for innovation to happen. But the issue is you have these sort of countries where people will go, let's say, to innovate in the healthcare space, and they create, all these different products. The problem then is to scale that to other countries, and that's really the goal of it. And so you have no red tape to do what you need to do, but now you're going to enter into markets that are going to just break you in half, right? So
What can happen, Antonio, is that once a precedence is set, once a particular country is able to benefit out of it, then the citizens will start asking for it because healthcare is everybody's problem. It is not a specific problem of some individual. It's everybody's problem. So
but
if
we
somebody
see
is
I hear where you're coming from, but look, let's say the cannabis industry, there's a medical aspect to cannabis. It's proven to reduce anxiety, to help with epilepsy. I give my dog has epilepsy. I give him THC CBD drops every day, and it's helping him a ton. He's super energetic. I have a GSP. The guy runs nonstop. He's quite calm now, a little bit more, and I think we've decreased the amount of seizures he's had. But there's a proven model that it does work. Yet countries are pushing for it and we still don't have results. But large scale pharmaceutical companies are able to promote all types of drugs that are many times over more dangerous for the human body, but yet are distributed for profit very easily. So as much as there's many suppressed things that are good. Obviously there's a bad side to cannabis in a sense. You don't want people going around high all day, and it puts a little bit of a dent in the community in a sense. But at the same time, there is a medical argument for it, and a lot of people benefit from it, and it still remains um, a very difficult substance or product at scale in many countries. So there's a lot of laws around it.
I think that's a paradox. And what I also see is that whenever you create a system that is highly, highly regulated, the generally it leads to some level of corruption.
Yeah. Oh, of
It
course.
becomes an avenue for corruption. And in a way, like what's happening in healthcare is that we have created such complex systems that suffocate innovation. It's only the large pharma companies that are able to pay off and get away.
Those right. Those very regulations are lobbied for on behalf of these large entities to do exactly this. The money buys the regulation. The regulation doesn't let anybody in. The monopolies form, they stay in power. You have to fight tooth and nail to not just create the product, but to overcome the regulations, to possibly try and feel like it's a it's a very difficult war to win. It's a David versus Goliath kind of scenario, and power to those who go and try and put the effort in every day. And eventually, there'll be a change of the guard, right? There will be, but it's not easy. And I think that these large companies, whether they're pharmaceutical companies or they're large investment companies that walk into many different industries and kind of own them, they've just put themselves in a position that it's very very hard to remove them or to play against them. They've made it very very difficult. There should be. I mean, hopefully, again, and hopefully in many countries there starts to be government that will fight against this, because these are the monopolies that form in a capitalistic society. In the United States, for example, right? We have a perfect capitalistic society, not perfect, but we have these enormous companies that at the end of the day they're controlling.
You know, my hope in 2025 is that with AI, we should try to reduce as much red tape as possible from every vertical. And red tape, when I say red tape, one example I want to give is the recent Magnus Carlsen's example where the guy was wearing a jeans and what he wears on when he's playing chess has nothing to do with the chess game. I mean, as long as he's wearing something morally decent, it should be fine. But this is exactly what red tape does. That you end up creating rules that are not related to the sport at all. But you want it, and you kind of try to eliminate players because somebody is not following a rule. I think that's what is happening with a lot of industries with the red tape.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, the Magnus Carlsen thing is interesting. Did he end up?
Back because the whole world was
Was right.
like making fun of the whole chess federations that were
Yeah.
doing this. And
Right.
other thing was like the whole sponsors and all that would have um, backed off if the Magnus was not participating. So that's why they kind of buckled. But the traditional old school thinking is that we have the rules, you have to follow it. I mean, we don't care about freaking chess. We kind of care whether you're not wearing the jeans or not.
And we spoke about this in a couple of podcasts ago, regarding the idea of the regulating an industry, and I mean deregulating it. It's it's an art. It really is, because as much as you want to deregulate it, the regulations to some extent you would hope that they had some sort of a purpose to prevent something that wasn't beneficial.
Let me share an interesting thought. Can we ask AI itself that, hey, these are the regulations that I have for this industry. What are the set of regulations do you think are like irrelevant?
Until we see creative thinking from AI, I don't think that.
It doesn't require AGI, right? It's just like, for example, uh, the players should not be allowed to wear jeans. AI will be able to very clearly point out that this
Yeah,
thing
but
has
those are
nothing to do with this.
that type of regulation is neither here nor there. That doesn't affect the outcome in a sense, right? It's not like, hey, look, if we put a ban on jeans, like, we're going to prevent X, Y, and Z. The very reason for regulation is that it's going to actually prevent something, right? Or maybe it's conducive towards making a situation better. Like, oh, you need to hire at least X amount of people for this type of job that are of whatever descent, or there's a purpose to the regulation. This
So
is
that's
sort
what
of a.
I'm saying. Like, would like the current day AI with the LLMs, we will be able to solve that problem.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah, it
like
doesn't even need LLMs. It just needs it just needs a conversation.
sometimes we are not critical thinkers. We are like, okay, we've let these regulations happen unless Magnus questioned it. Everybody thought that's the way it is, right?
So us in the software, space, and building out solutions and doing a lot of really cool and hopefully innovative things. How do you see? Do you like are like, I asked this for both me and you. Like, when do you see these LLMs really coming into play for us to help us and allow us to move more efficiently, to build faster, and to do things? When, because we're having a lot of, at least on my side, like, I'm having a lot of talks with our developers, and they seem to be utilizing it, but it's not like, hey, plug it into this and this and you have your app. It's the bullshit that's going around that you can just create something in a matter of minutes or days is sort of a fantasy still. Do you see improvements in speed of development, and do you see that coming into play more and more now in 2025? What do you see with that?
Yeah. So very interesting question, and I want to answer this as someone who is managing a bunch of developers and have been using AI for a while now to do code reviews and stuff. First of all, to build any large scale system, the complexity AI. Okay, let me take it back. So let me say it this way. So you're building an app. An app will have hundreds of requirements. You want search to be operate in certain way. You want the home screen to look certain way. You want different workflows in the application. When no developer today has the absolute ability to give those kind of instructions to AI in a precise manner so that it generates the code that precisely matches to the requirements that we have. So what essentially happens is the developers will ask the AI to, hey, write me an authentication code in a .NET or a Node.js code, and it will write an authentication code. You can take that code, customize it, and plug it in your code, in your overall code base. You can do that. But as you keep building the application and as it starts becoming more and more complex, it becomes extremely hard to give the prompts to the AI to incorporate all the different permutation and combination of scenarios that you have within your overall solution, so that it generates precise code that you can just copy paste.
couldn't you ask you this? Like, this is a purely sort of innocent question in a sense of, couldn't you give the LLM the context or just feed it the entire code base and allow it to understand or somehow explain to it how it works and what it does, and then it build upon that contextual understanding?
So you can give that, and then as long as you're writing like a monolithic application, you can do that. But if you're writing an application which has a lot of scenarios, and you have some very custom scenarios which are not like standard out of the box well-known kind of patterns, then it becomes very hard. Now, take for example, if you're building an inventory management system, there is enough documentation available for any standard like ChatGPT to understand that you're building an inventory management system. And you can ask ChatGPT to write down all the requirements for an inventory management system. ChatGPT will write it, and then you can say, "Hey, I like all this requirements that you've written. Can you write me a code in Python or write me a code in .NET?" And it can go ahead and write a code for that. So that's possible right now. But if you have, say, more and more complex requirements, and many times what happens is when you're defining the requirements of a project, not everything is still documented. There is certain um, you know intellectual decisions that you make when you are creating applications.
Right.
Those are not verbally written, but developers do make those kind of decisions
Right. There's
on a
many.
day-to-day basis.
There's a variety of scenarios that has to occur at a particular point that
Yeah.
needs to be thought through. That doesn't have a logical path, so to speak. There's many logical paths. Which one is the most effective one? What does it need to do, and where does that need to also substantiate in another part of the application so it all sort of balances out? So, in a sense, as much context as you feed it, it's never really going to know what those intellectual gaps are, because at the end of the day, it's a brainstorm. So, would
So
it
what
then,
I
in
do,
effect,
Anthony, is that the traditional programming languages that we have been using, the way traditionally the developers are trained to learn these programming languages, I think that will change in next few years. There is absolute need for an AI-driven programming language. And
right?
the
Because
way
you go
I
ahead.
envision that programming language is that it will have something like Lego pieces. You have standard Lego pieces, and you kind of use those Lego pieces to build various structures, various things from that. In today's
Exactly.
world,
And it's taken into consideration the many different facets of the software, and it realized where those gaps lie, and it have the brainstorming session with you.
another thing is that what we will also end up doing, and I think in a year or two, is to start building highly modular applications
Right.
where each module or each function or each a
Component
small
is its
subset
own.
of code kind of exists on its own,
Right.
and then it kind of connects piece by piece with and informs a larger structure.
Right. It's sort of how we're doing the many different facets of our businesses, where it's this can work independently, can work with another connector, but it can also work with our own. So, like, to the example that you recently gave, like Legos, in a sense. Interesting. When do you see, and
And to come to think about it, even human life or any sort of life form is in that format. You have like cells in our body, and all these cells connect with each other to kind of give rise to this overall structure of
yeah,
the
and
body.
yeah, and they all know what they're here to do, and they do
Yeah,
that.
right. So even our software solutions eventually will start becoming in that sense. Long ago, I participated in a conference which talked about self-organizing systems, and there are like large scale systems that self-organize themselves in the universe. And what the theory predicts is that life eventually came because of that. Like, it self-organizes itself. Although from a religious standpoint, I disagree with that. But the point that, a lot of things in the universe, they are made up of these small blocks, and they kind of come together to give rise to a larger structure which might have a very different existence of itself. So I think that's what eventually will happen with the software, where you have all these small pieces of software, and then eventually you kind of create an operating system out of it, or you create maybe a word processing machine out of it.
And I mean, even going down, you say from a cellular level, but also at a larger level, we are another modular piece to a bigger structure that we don't
Yep.
understand.
Yep. I think I went a little bit more abstract and more meta in a sense, but uh,
No,
but from I think as Lego pieces, I think in couple of years you'll start seeing that software will become more or less like connecting bunch of Lego pieces, where there are people who are creating all this small Lego pieces of different nature, and a non-programmer can effectively take all this objects and build a product of.
does GitHub sort of resemble what we're talking about to some extent right now?
A cleaned up version of GitHub would be, because right now anybody can put anything on GitHub, but say you kind of take like a very subset of highly efficient codes that are there on GitHub and create this small pieces, and then let the people start using those pieces to connect. So then it just becomes drag and drop. You'll start seeing like drag and drop kind of wizards where you can do it, or you can just give like instructions, human instructions, that hey, you can say, hey, authentication module, can you add it? And then can you add like Facebook login? Can you add a Google login to this? And on my profile page, I want like a picture to be captured
This
in
is a
high
cool idea.
resolution.
This is a cool idea.
Yeah,
Sort of like a new innovative iteration of like a GitHub, but more sophisticated, that it's in line with a certain set of requirements that it has to be cross cross connected to
yeah.
everything else that's built on the
I
system.
want to I want to give a shout out to my friend from Microsoft, Rishabh. So Rishabh and we had created a program when I was in Microsoft, a plugin on top of Visual Studio. What it does was, as you code, it will simultaneously show the output of how it looks like.
Nice.
And what was our goal was that eventually, like, if we can just give instructions to that, then it shows how the output will look like. We called it as Jarvis after the Iron Man. Iron Man had this robot that
All right.
that does something similar. So yeah, I just recollected. So
And the opposite, it would be very interesting if the opposite could hold true as well, for you to draw a picture and that reverse itself into a particular code base.
yeah, yeah. 100%. I think Figma guys at Figma would already be exploring that particular angle.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, it is around the corner. It's not here yet, and it's not as easy as, I feel like on X all we see is these very simply laid out, Shopify is dead or this is dead. Like, here's the solution, and it's, build your app in 25 minutes, and it's like very low quality. It's not there yet, and it's still going to take some time, and there is a lot more dynamicism that goes into developing a good
Yeah.
working product, and there's constantly upgrades. So it's with the help of AI. I think. How many years do you foresee something like this actually coming to fruition, where I can either draw my way into an application or go on a more sophisticated GitHub type environment and plug in the
Less than three
pieces?
years. Less than
Less
three
than
years.
2 years,
Less than 3 years.
3 years.
3 years. So in software, like when you're building software, there are a lot of things that we do are just CRUD operations. So anything that involves just the CRUD operations and does not involve any sort of logic, that AI can do it very quickly. For example, e-commerce. E-commerce, every functionality that you need in e-commerce, except for the recommendation engine, is just CRUD operations.
Right.
And even recommendation engine is not that complex to build. And there are like a lot of recommendation engine algorithms available. So AI will be able to very quickly give you a choice that, hey, which recommendation engine do you want? But general e-commerce can be done by AI in a fraction of a second.
So
So
Shopify still has about a 3-year lifeline. Well, they're much more than just e-commerce, but
yeah, so but I'm sure they're like trying to figure out how do we add more stuff in the next 3 years so that we still remain useful for the people. But the other
yeah,
thing that you need to take into account, recently Satya Nadella gave this interview where he said that SaaS applications will die out and it will just be AI agents. What I still feel is that the SaaS companies are like service providers. So to give a simple analogy, it's like these SaaS companies are, say they are like tea sellers. I mean, while you can go and make tea yourself, you can go and purchase a tea powder and make the tea yourself. But what these service providers are, these SaaS companies are doing is selling you a pre-made tea uh, with certain taste that you can very quickly just grab it and have it. That's what these SaaS companies are doing. So even though like you can actually make it, you will still go to a Starbucks or any sort of local cafe
is
that
is
selling
a I
coffee
think
or
yeah, I think this is a great comparison, and I think I'm going to take what you have said before and bring it in and sort of conclude in a sense that these the SaaS companies of the future, the once AI gets put into play and things are made a lot easier, there's going to be obviously a more there's going to be more services in one platform, but then that human that you're going to get less and less, but then later more and more, that's going to be the perhaps the visionary or the helper to you to do all these different things. That's going to be the asset. It's going to be the human in play that's going to help you walk through, hey, we need to put this piece and this piece together, and we need to go about this, and this is going to be the strategy, and almost build like what's going to happen is the SaaS company is just going to, it seems like it's going to inherit or create so many, a variety of such a wide set of applications that you can go with one business that has multiple different solutions and that has a consulting aspect to it to then approach markets and sales and different industries in a certain way that's going to walk you through it. So this human interaction is really going to be one that's going to be the asset in the software is just going to be part of the program possibly.
yeah. In the simple words for our viewers, even though you can make a tea, you'll
Still
still
need
not
it.
replace the small tea shops or the coffee shops, right? You can
Right.
you can make
Right.
a coffee of yours, but the barista still exists. They
I
make
love this, right?
coffee.
It's a very simple thing. You can make your coffee at home. Why do you go to Starbucks? SaaS is here to stay. Boom. Clip that. Awesome. Awesome. What other topics are exciting to you in 2025?
So, the other thing that we discussed, I mean, it kind of falls under the healthcare umbrella, so I don't want to bring that up again. I think from a political standpoint, I think 2025 is going to be an interesting year.
Hmm.
We thought a lot of conflicts have ended, but now 2024 gave rise to many more conflicts in the world, and I think 2025 is going to be a very pivotal year where we choose the path of more conflicts or the path of developing the economy.
It's understood, or at least my understanding is that there's supposed to be a de-escalation in many of the scenarios around the world. I cross my fingers because none of us want war. It's such a waste of resources and time, and things can be, a lot of really important things can get solved instead. But I mean, we hope for the best. We hope for the best. Absolutely.
Yeah. So of course, it's the same thing. I think 2025 we should focus on economy. We should focus on building nations, building infrastructure, building stuff. So there was other thing that I wanted to bring it up in other podcasts as well. And I think 2025. I'm not sure this can be accomplished in 2025, but I think the seeds have to be um, sown now for this. The aeroplanes that we fly in, these machines were built almost 50 years ago. not much innovation has actually happened in the aircraft design. Again, it's an industry that has highly regulated, and
Hmm.
a good reason. And I'm not saying regulation shouldn't be there, but what has happened is because of such extreme regulations, people have given up. Like people are still like okay with just using that outdated technology and with very minimal incremental changes just to meet the safety standards. And we are flying those age-old machines. So the technology itself for almost all the aircraft in the world has not upgraded in last 5 decades.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. And now we have all these problems going on with these Boeing aircraft. It's so regulated, and you have lives in the sky. Like innovation sounds cool, but I'd rather fly in a plane that's been proven to fly across than get there, 20 minutes faster, but take a risk.
And it's so strange that a plane disappears and we're not able to figure out where it is for like years.
Alien.
So it's so strange that how can aeroplanes disappear?
Yeah.
You can track where your Uber Eats guy is. You can track where the aeroplane is.
The oceans are
Mind
very
boggling.
deep. The oceans are very deep. If it crashes into an ocean, it goes, where does it go? What happens? Who knows?
You know, right? If your Uber Eats guy has stopped somewhere, you know where the Uber guy has stopped.
Right.
You
It's
can
always being
spot
guided.
from.
The GPS is there. Right. No, it's
Yeah,
true.
it's so strange that the plane kind of disappears and we don't know where it is, and
Mhm.
the whole technology has not evolved. And I was also reading an article that essentially said that we have sort of become complacent because, and the companies have become complacent. They just want to just mass produce a technology that's already passing the regulations that they have. So now, if they want to introduce something new, it's not that innovation has not happened at these companies, but if they try to introduce something new, it has to go through an entire process of getting approvals, and that's very expensive. So they don't want to take any sort of chance. So they just want to like, I mean, these are the planes that work, and they just want to go ahead with that.
It's like, and so we do. I mean, we ask ourselves this question, like, is the innovation? I mean, there could be innovation in the sky, where I mean, at the end of the day, the airplane flies faster, right? That's the innovation. That it's more comfortable and it flies faster. There's nothing really else to innovate. Then the next solution is okay. So we should start really focus on building underground tunnels that get you from A to B much quicker, right? There should be there that should be the next.
I think when I look at aeroplanes, I think there are multiple issues. One, they consume a lot of fuel, and they are unnecessarily very heavy. If you look at the way there are birds that do intercontinental travel, there are migratory birds that continuously fly for thousands of kilometers. And these birds are very small, and somehow they are able to generate energy and travel across continents. And if you look at their anatomy and the kind of elements that they are using, the kind of molecules that they are built of, I think if some level of research happens in that, we will try to figure out other kind of materials that we can use to create newer aeroplanes.
Right. It's not. We'll say it again in another way. It's not an energy problem. It's an intellectual problem. I mean, even it's energy itself. It's right. It's the structure of the device itself. It's the materials. It's the innovation that goes. It's true, but I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get from point A to point B faster. It does. All these things are taken into consideration, but that's where it is. And I think that if that's the only goal to get from point A to point B faster, is there other types of solutions that can be applied, like maybe some sort of range between countries, ranges within countries themselves that can get you from point A to point B quickly, and then you take a larger range underground tunnel or whatever it may be to the next destination, and just developing a more, why not, why continue to fly? Is that the most efficient route? Can we travel much faster in a much more safe way in a tube through a perfectly dynamically cut, you know, underground tunnel that will allow you to move at X speed without and lowering the risk without all the.
All those possibilities are there, but I think when it comes to exploring organic materials to aircrafts, I think we have not even figured it out. There are birds that do transatlantic travel, and they are able to, maybe their speed is like, 5 times lesser than an aircraft. Maybe they are flying at 100 kilometers or 60 kilometers per hour flight, but that we can figure out with more means. But this bird is literally on few calories of energy,
Yeah,
and
but they're
it's
not.
able
I'm
to,
sure they're not flapping across the continent.
yeah,
They're going high enough to use the wind gusts and sort of
figure it out.
glide through. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
an
so they figure
interesting
it
thing.
out. So I think there needs to be some mechanism, and if not for human travel, at least for the cargo travel, those kind of technologies can come into play, where from one coast to another coast um, without traveling over the land. If we can figure out a way where we can do at a very low cost transportation, why not?
No, of course. That's the goal. The idea is to drive efficiency in everywhere, especially in travel. It would make the world more flat. It would allow people to discover more of the world. Relatively expensive to still travel in this day and age. The costs are supposed to go down over time, right? In a sense.
So generally, when I look at the innovations that happen around, I'm excited about AI, because what AI is trying to do is trying to mimic humans, or trying to mimic an actual intelligent life. But if you look at other areas, we don't try to mimic or extract innovation from life forms.
And they're incredibly innovative species that, yeah. Right. I mean, there's some things that you can argue, like your large intestine. Like there's things that are not like, does it need, I think organs can be, better. I think, we can, there's more dynamicism to it, but in a way we're self-healing, really incredible species, and I mean the world around us is a beautiful thing.
What I'm saying, Antonio, on that point is that there are so many animals around us that display certain level of intelligence, and there's a billion years of evolution associated with those animals. So
Yeah.
they have figured out how to do, transatlantic
Survive.
travel. They have been traveling. They've figured out. It's important that we kind of figure out what kind of tech that has gone into it, what kind of materials that they are using in their wings, what kind of materials that they are using in their beak to meet these temperatures, to meet these weather changes when they do the when they do the travel, and yet remain alive, active, and do it year over year,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
right?
like if there's a device that's maybe a more personalized device that has proportionate sized wings versus the weight from the middle that you can carry luggage that would allow you to almost glide in that way. But there is a very big risk factor in a sense. It would be regulated to some extent, and I think we would go back to square one. I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think what has happened is more the mechanical stuff we use, we are sort of trying to solve the problem in a brute force manner with the mechanical blades, and drone. When you're building a drones or helicopters, you're basically using mechanical blades and mechanical motors to achieve the speed and achieve the airlift, and you're essentially trying to solve the problem through brute force.
Mhm.
There are other efficient means. Now, there is the eagle, when it's able to take off, it's not like going 200 kilometers per hour and then taking off. It's able to take off instantly. So there is some level of, just like when we are building a robot, we're trying to mimic how humans walk, or how we cross an obstacle, how do we jump across an obstacle. And there are robotic companies that are spending like billions of dollars just trying to figure out how humans are able to run, walk, climb, those kind of things. Imagine doing the same thing with every bird and try to figure out, like, how are they able to do a lift off, or how they are able to remain in the flight in a very steady manner, conserve energy. And one
But I think also to look at it from a different perspective is like, we didn't replicate the horse to try and go faster. We created a car. So as much as we could learn from a horse, there was a
You can
limitation
say that as a
to
good
that.
example. A
So
good example.
In a way, there is efficiency to be learned and things to be learned, but at the same time, if we were to go on that path, we would just be riding on a horse that had a motor and that could just you know
That's a good counter.
it's, I mean, no, but
You,
there's no right
you
or
just
wrong. It's
just
just
put a massive hole in my theory.
there's things to be learned, of course. There is efficiency, and I think that even from a travel perspective, the idea to levitate and move forward and move, anti-gravity type devices, there's a lot we can learn, but there's a lot of the other side of things too. So it's give and take.
Let me ask, like in the long run, do you envision a world with roads?
Say that again. Do I what?
In 100 years from now, do you envision a world that will have roads?
Roads?
Because I think the invention of the wheel and the invention of the motor vehicles led us to create the roads.
Roads, of course. The infrastructure.
If
It was
we
a
say
result.
figure out a way where we have horse-like machines and bird-like creatures that will take us in the air, then we don't need the roads and the world.
100%. I mean, there's many things that can happen. You're right. Once we come up with an invention, imagine if you could just have, maybe you could have a small, maybe a drone to some extent, just be able to levitate and take you from point A to point B, and there be some sort of uh, like a like a system that you would follow that would allow, you would have certain heights you would need to travel to go a certain direction in order to, like, you would abide by a set of rules just as a road would be, but it would be in the air. And so there would be flight guidelines that AI could handle internally that would allow
So
you to just,
if there's a good enough AI, then the AI will be able to follow those rules and
that's it.
let.
There's no roads. And now you have your device, and if there's a cheaper way of energy and batteries could last longer, you could hypothetically take that drone to the next state or possibly the next country. How does weather play into that? What height do you have to be? And there's risks to be analyzed, but I'm sure that we'll accomplish that. I think in the next 100 years, I think that we would be traveling much differently for sure. I don't think we'll be on a road.
So you think at that time environmentalists will be writing that the whole construction of roads was an ecological damage that humans did because of our inability to mimic animals during that whole century? Don't you think so?
The irony of that, huh?
It will become a case study that, at one point humans didn't know how to fly and didn't know how to,
Oh
so
yeah, of course.
created these
Yeah,
roads.
we used to. Yeah, no, are you kidding me? 150 years from now, people will be like, people used to get in a 3,000 pound car that made out of metal and just drive it themselves and crash into each other. How stupid is that, right? Like, how dangerous is that?
Destroyed mountains and hills to build roads. And we
Right.
have laid concrete on the earth where no plant can grow just because we want to travel from point A to point B.
Right. It's like, and that goes to show also with the evolving innovations, call it, comes the regulations that are then implemented that need to be deconstructed to allow for the innovation to take place. Because if the regulations stayed in place, we would still be in the car and not flying. So these things, it's the balance between the innovation, what's going on, the timing of all of these ideas is very important, but it can stagnate, and we're going to see a lot of that again. The financial aspect and interest behind suppressing innovations to keep the existing solutions in place so the people that own these solutions can continue to monetize them. I mean, it's in their best interest to suppress. It's a money game for them. And so what's going to allow that to change, or how do we enforce change in that way so that we can live a better life?
Awesome, awesome. Antonio, this has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. This was very exploratory. We went across multiple topics, and I think we'll take up another interesting topic in the next episode.
Amazing. Thank you for the conversation, Abu. Have a great one.